a good venture capitalist is in a support system to build a great company. They're not in for the quick buck and shouldn't be.
People who tour these galleries often say, wow, I had no idea. Many think computing is about engineers and mathematicians. But if you've ever sent an email or banked online, you know computing is about you. If ideas and innovation are the engines of startup companies, venture capital is the fuel. Knowing what and when and who to invest in requires unique skill. Bill Draper is the investor behind some of technology's most fascinating and profitable ventures. Tonight he joins Dave Iverson to discuss his book, The Startup Game, and share insights from 5 decades in Silicon Valley.
I'd like to begin by telling a story, which you tell early in your book, and it's about your father's first venture capital effort, when he had gotten a large bonus. This is in the late 1920s. And he thought it would be a terrific idea, rather than to pay off your family mortgage, to invest it, and to invest it in what he thought was a great thing, an automatic coffee maker.
That's right. And this was 1929. He was a successful investment banker, but a young guy, and given a big bonus was a big deal. He just bought a house out in Westchester and might have paid off the mortgage, but he invested in this coffee maker, German coffee maker, and I think he was intrigued by the coffee clutch, the idea that Germany had made good, I guess he liked the coffee, and big mistake, because he struggled for years afterward to keep us in that house and to keep paying that mortgage.
To your first rule about investing, right? Don't invest what you can't afford to lose.
That's right. Don't invest what you can't afford to lose. And also don't invest in any one coffee maker. I would never go to one of you in the audience and say, you know, I've got this great deal, I think you ought to invest with me in it. Because you've got to have a panoply, you've got to have a broad portfolio in order to make the numbers work. I tell in the book a story about when I went back to Washington to run the Export-Import Bank for the Reagan administration. I left a small SBIC with my son, Tim. And I came back about 6 months later, and with the accountant went over what Tim had done with this, because it was just a little family pocket of money in this SBIC. And so I said, well, what about this one? And he said, oh, that was a write-off. Well, what about this one? Well, that is sick, and I think it's almost dead. What about this one? This is in the living dead category. What about this one? And he said, oh, that's gone. And the next one's gone. Well, what about this sixth one? And I was losing confidence in my son's ability. I hadn't trained him, by the way. He just took it over. He had worked at Hewlett-Packard and at Alex Brown for a couple of years each, but really. So I thought, God, I should have given him some coaching. Number 6, what about that? That is a home run. And that was parametric technology, which just took off and is still a great company.
The way you describe it in the book is the first 5 were listed as followed in the accounting book: dead, dying, bankrupt, probably won't make it, and not so good.
And that is the business. So you've got to invest and diversify, or the numbers, or it's just too big a risk.
So 1 out of 6, Bill, wouldn't be a very good batting average in baseball. It wouldn't be a very good shooting percentage in basketball. Is it a good percentage in the venture capital?
It all depends on number 6. Because if it's a 2-for-1, if it's a nice single, double, it will be good in of its own, but it's not going to pay for all the rest. But in venture capital, in this wonderful scientific community with all these wonderful computer geniuses around, a couple of them are going to be bonanzas. And when you hit a bonanza, it makes the whole game worthwhile.
When you go out and you're assessing whether or not someone has an idea that you think might be worth investing in, what do you look for first?
I first look in the eyes of the entrepreneur and look for passion, energy. Everybody can do this. I'm told that I'm pretty good at appraising people pretty fast. Just how they walk down the street. If there's kind of a sloppy, slow walk, he might be a genius, by the way, but you better have somebody else who's running the company to knock on the doors and get that customer and make that company work. So you look for energy, vision, you look for commitment, you look for somebody that's done his or her homework.
Is it also conversely assessing whether or not someone knows what they aren't good at?
Very important, and then they've got to fill that void by getting some good person. And you try to hire, the best managers always say they try and hire people that are better, smarter than they are, but you've got to know your own weaknesses so that you can fill the void and hire to round out the team. The team is, so anyway, that's the first thing I look at is the team. Now, if you talk to Don Valentine over at Sequoia, he'll say it's all the market. He was vice president of marketing of Intel before he went into the venture business. And he's been very successful. And marketing is tremendously important. And I was in marketing myself before going into the venture capital business. It's really important. But if you've got weak people trying to fill a big market, it's really hard. Whereas if you've got a really top flight, the best in the whole territory, trying to fill a smaller market, that's going to be more successful, I think.
You also list in the book some of what you see as being the most common mistakes that would-be entrepreneurs make. One of them being not recognizing their own shortcomings, not being able to say, I need a CEO. I might be a brilliant engineer, but I need a CEO. Yep. And you tell that story in a couple of instances. Yep. One of which is the story of the founding of Yahoo, which you and your son Tim had an early glimpse at a little trailer near the Stanford campus. Yep. And you wandered into that messy, cluttered trailer, tripping over bicycles, and had Jerry Yang, I guess, look up for you. You wanted to know the answer to what question? Well, it was Philo,
Dave Philo, his sidekick. Jerry had given us a tour of the Stanford computers. I had never seen so many computers at the Stanford Engineering. And by the way, I don't think there would be a Silicon Valley without Stanford, and we all owe a tremendous amount to that wonderful system that is in place that is generating ideas and young people with competence to go change the world. So anyway, Jerry showed me this bank of computers. I had met him at Buck's Restaurant because my partner, Robin Richards, who was just 28 years old and just a second-year student at Stanford Business School, and this was mid-career of me. I was coming back to start an India fund. But anyway, she knew about Jerry Yang having something pretty interesting. So I was focused on India, but I got Tim to come over and join us at Buck's Restaurant. And anyway, we looked at this bank of computers, and he showed us a real estate a house for a piece of real estate for sale in Hillsborough or something, and some other things for sale. And then I went to see Dave Philo in the little trailer because Stanford asked them to move out because they were taking over all their computers. And Dave said, what do you want to know? I said, well, what do you mean, what do I want to know? Well, just ask any question. So I was on the board of Yale at the time, and I said, well, what's the tuition at Yale? And he punches a few numbers and a few keys, and there pops up a website with YAL on the spines of 4 books. And I'm pretty impressed just to see that. And they, of course, had this indexing of all the webs. And then he punches a few more buttons, and $21,500. And that's the tuition at Yale. So I was blown away. Tim was blown away. And the deal got away because we went over to Tim's Draper, Fisher, Jervison. It was just Draper, Fisher then. If Jervison had been there, I think they would have gotten Yahoo. Jervison is, the technical brains in that outfit, and he's damn good. But we all knew it was good, but Jerry said, and back to your point, we want a CEO with us because John Fisher said, the management's going to be a little weak. It's just the 2 guys. And we want a CEO. So right away, they had already researched, thought about that, understood themselves, what their strengths and weaknesses were. And Sequoia came up with this not only the best CEO idea, but the best money. And Tim's firm got outbid, but that was the one that got away. That's the first chapter in the book, I think.
You mentioned a moment ago about the role of Stanford, and I wanted to ask you about that as well, because we also live in a time now of great concern about what we ought to invest in and whether or not we should be spending money on universities. The University of California is struggling at this moment in time. Do you think, is that a concern of yours, that we're not focusing enough on the key role that universities play in driving this particular field?
Well, I think universities evolve and they gradually get stronger and stronger, or weaker and weaker. They get more and more money from their alumni, or in some cases from the government. But I don't know that we can do a lot to increase the power of the engineering department at Stanford. I do think that every university in the country should be thinking more about their contribution to the technology, mathematics, science of the understanding of their students, because the world is changing so fast, and everybody here in Silicon Valley realizes how productive and exciting it is to see so many new concepts and new products and new services come alive right from this combination of intellectual support, academia, the entrepreneurial energy, the venture capital money, and the whole system really works well here in the mother church of innovation in Silicon Valley.
I guess what I'm curious about is how you see that being sustained. We were talking before this luncheon began about whether or not Silicon Valley will continue to be the mother church in the future. And you said, absolutely. But in this challenging time that we're a part of, you've also played a role in government. We're in the Reagan administration for a number of years. I'm curious to know what you think, Bill, about the role of government and what it is right now to have Silicon Valley continue. I want to just read you one thing that Jerry Brown said in his State of the State address a week or so back. He said, "We have the inventors, the dreamers, the entrepreneurs, the venture capitalists, and a vast array of physical, intellectual, and political assets. For generations, California has defied the odds and the conventional wisdom and prospered in unexpected ways. People keep coming here because of the dream that is California. And once here, their determination and boundless energy feeds that dream and makes it grow." And
But
yet
what he
many
didn't
people
say,
wonder, yes, okay,
what he didn't say was that people keep leaving here to go to Oregon or some other state because of the interference and heavy tax overlay that he and Sacramento have put on us. And the burden we're reading about right now, that they've been overspending, and every family knows you got to meet your own budget and somehow live within that budget. And we haven't done that. And I think the first thing for government to do is to go back into its cage, in a way. Now, I'm not like my son Tim, who thinks that, you know, we don't need a government. We probably have a private army for. I mean, but I feel very that a supportive government is great. And Obama, I met with President Obama here in Palo Alto when he was out a few months ago. And what would you tell him, you know, that you got a few minutes to get an idea? And I said, you know, you seem to be very supportive of small business. And I think you're a great advocate for small business. But here in Silicon Valley, what we want is small businesses to grow into big businesses, and that's where the employment leverage comes in, and you're worried about employment. You should either be for business or against business. God, he's talked nothing but business ever since I gave him that message, so I'm taking all the credit. Anyway, you get my message that government, I don't think, can improve Stanford one iota by any interference, except any money that they have, like NIH money or any kinds of money that go, and a lot of research money is spent in the government, and they come up with some things that no individual private company could, like the jet airplane. You know, Boeing, I think, has benefited dramatically from the government involvement in the jet aircraft initially. And DARPA, we all know, came up with the beginnings of the internet. There are lots of amazing things that happen, and World War II, I guess it was, where there was some great drugs that came along that cured people, and so there are medical applications and all that. So there are certain things that government can do and should do, and building highways and infrastructure and protection and that kind of thing. But man, I don't think they need to get in directly into the genes of the Stanford faculty.
Let me ask you about how you go about spotting good ideas. We talked briefly about the Yahoo example that you knew was good. You quote Henry Ford early in the book as saying that if he asked people what they would want, people would say, well, we want faster horses. How do you assess when someone has an idea that's not just a faster horse, that will fundamentally be something that will bring about change?
In my case, it's luck. I don't, you know, honestly, I have a hard time sensing whether this is going to be disruptive technology that's going to break through. But if it smells really good, and even to me, I understand it, like in, you know, in Skype's case, there were others that were trying to to do this system of getting your voice from London to Chicago without wires. There were others, but there was nobody doing it as well as they. The voice quality was really clear, and it was magical because it was so obvious. And so I was just lucky that I got Howard Hartenbaum to look around Europe, because I thought it was a little crowded here, and Tim Draper told him to look at Kazaa, and they were bankrupt, but the two founders had gone up to Stockholm, and Howard followed them and helped them write their business plan. So he and I were the first two investors in Skype. Well, that's the luck side of the thing. Now, for example, Tom Perkins took me in to see the first laser here. And neither of us could figure out what the application would be, but we knew there was something very important with that coherent light just going and showing up. And of course, the laser I never would have dreamed it'd be in medical applications, in warfare.
So
it's hard. It's hard.
But is it fundamentally intuitive in that way, that you see something and then not being afraid to bet on it?
Yeah, those are two different things. I might intuitively see it, but still be afraid to bet on it. But I guess what I'm saying is that everything works a little bit on the shoulders of the forerunner. And so in Sutter Hill, we made a lot of money. Dave and I had a tour of the museum, which I recommend to everybody here to go see that marvelous museum, and take plenty of time, because it's been changed so dramatically from when I had seen it before. But we were talking about it, and somehow there were a bunch of disk drives there, and I pointed out that we had Sutter Hill had made a lot of money in the disk drive business. We back Century Data that came out of IBM, Priam, the Quantum, which it was an interesting put in the book about picking a leader. It was this is the first time I've ever seen this done, but four engineers walk in to Sutter Hill, and I said, well, who's going to be the president of this? After they had given a whole half-hour description. Well, we haven't really talked about that. Jim, you have the least to do. Why don't you be president? And he stayed president until it became $1 billion company. But we made a lot of money in the disk drive business. So there, each one was a step ahead, based on the past. So you kind of knew there was progress. In something like Skype, it's just a game changer. And each one of those disk drive companies was good and successful and made a lot of money for us. But were perhaps lower risk, but somehow not nearly as dramatic and not as profitable as made 1,000 times on that investment. And so you don't have, it's not clear. Everything is a little bit different.
I'm curious about your referencing the fact that you were a history major at Yale. There's an old saying about the liberal arts, which so many people these days feel is not necessarily what you ought to major in, because after all, what can you do with a liberal arts degree? And the old saying about the liberal arts is it trains you for nothing, but it prepares you for everything.
Oh, I like that.
Do you believe in that? And that
sure
people
do.
need to have that?
I sure do.
background?
But at some point, and it's earlier in the case of a scientist, you've got to start down your career path. And In my case, I had no plan. So a history major was a very good thing for me to get my grounding and and sort of feel like I was comfortable in any situation, but not much of a specialization. So I think there are different kinds of people. There are people that grow up right from the start. My son, Tim, is an engineer, went through the Stanford engineering EE program, but then broadened out into business, didn't really become a scientist. Everybody's got a little different angle on that, and I think we should be encouraging more men and women in the United States to go into mathematics, science, engineering, because the world is becoming more and more exciting, fast-moving, technical, and if a kid doesn't know at about 8 years old how to manage a computer, he's falling behind already.
But every now and again, a history major is a good thing.
But always, the majority will be history, English, poetry, and I think that's helped to drive the democracy, clear thinking in overall management. So I would not recommend that everybody be a quantum scientist.
You've also mentioned that you like people who leave PhD programs, who don't finish them. Why is that?
Well, like Jerry Yang, it takes about 7 years to get a PhD, and that takes a lot of patience. And if you're that patient as an entrepreneur, you're probably not going to make it to the exit. However, there are exceptions, and we know a variety of them that have been hugely successful, who went through the whole PhD program and became tremendous contributors to our economy and our life.
You played a role not only in government, but you also, through that, your role at the Export-Import Bank, became very interested in developing economies. And one of the things that I found intriguing about your book was what you had to say about China. Len Shostak, the board chair here, was saying maybe the next Silicon Valley, or was quoting Gordon Bell as saying maybe the next Silicon Valley will be Shanghai. And I know you don't agree with that, but I also know that you think that China has done remarkable things, and that Deng Xiaoping in particular probably did more good for more human beings than anybody in your experience. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I say in the book, that there's one man who did more for entrepreneurship, and this book is about entrepreneurship and the relationship between entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. And it's largely about Silicon Valley, but I did, as chairman of the Export-Import Bank, go with Don Regan, who was then Secretary of Treasury, to meet with Deng Xiaoping in 2 years after he took over, after Mao's death. And he said, Mao told everybody they had to grow rice for the Iron Rice Bowl. But I'm from Sichuan, and that's one of 15 provinces, and I told them in Sichuan to grow anything they wanted because they were all poor. Now, 2 years later, and he used this term, at least the interpreter, he said, now they're all rich. Now that's 2 years later. I doubt that they had that dramatic a shift, but it was an eye-opener for us, because here we were on a visit trying to encourage relationships between China and America on the economic front. And he said, moreover, I'm going to let them trade with anybody they want, do anything they want, and I'm going to encourage the whole country to get rich, and say that it's not bad to be rich, even if you're a communist. So, it's hard for us to swallow all that in a few minutes, but we were excited because this was the turning of what turned out to be what I call the biggest event for entrepreneurship in the history of man, because they had so many people there that were under this terrible system. And he managed to make entrepreneurship and getting rich and a free economic system work under a communist political system. It's still hard to believe he pulled it off, but so that's why I agree with you. And now, as far as Shanghai not being a Silicon Valley, I think it will be a I think there'll be a lot of Silicon Valleys around the world. I think we'll always be the mother church. And we'll always probably have a little edge, but no doubt about it, there will be sort of accumulations of venture capitalists and entrepreneurs around good universities in all parts of the world. And I think we're in for a lot of competition, but that's good. That's what we thrive on in this country if we allow that to happen.
On that point, Bill, I do want to come back to this question of sort of how Silicon Valley is sustained, because it would seem like education has to play a key role in that. And California now ranks, as you know, near the bottom in what it spends on education per capita. Science results came out recently. California ranked 47th among grade schoolers. So isn't that something we have to face if we're going to continue to make Silicon Valley what you'd like to see it sustained as the mother church of the future?
Yeah. No, it's, I just agree totally. I think we've got to do it, and we've got to get, I had dinner with Michelle Rhee about
The former
2 or 3
superintendent of the Washington, D.C. schools.
Yeah, former superintendent of Washington, D.C. schools. And she was out here, and she's going to take on this LIFO system, last in, first out, so that the teachers, she considers the younger teachers the most competent, the most energetic, the most productive, and the best teachers. Now, that's not fair. I mean, you know, you have great teachers at all ages, but she knows that it's an unfair system to these young, bright people because of LIFO. And her concept is that she needs political cover, and she's got it in about 6 states now, to go after the system in the school system that protects, you know, that basically you have a teacher has tenure, and it's biased against, when there's a cutback, it's biased against the younger teachers. So she's trying to split the community, the teaching community, so that she gets support from younger teachers.
Coming back to the wonderful exhibit that Bill referenced before that's here at the Computer History Museum, it ends with a variety of people talking about the future and what the future might look like and what kids should think about if they want to become part of the Silicon Valley of the future. And and I can't recall her name, but there's someone at the end who says, I was lucky because my mom told me as a girl that I should say yes to everything. Of course, Bill said, that's quite a mom to say to a young daughter, say yes.
That is really dangerous. That just happened today.
But having said that, is that part of, though, what we need to have as a kind of mentality about saying yes to everything, so that we find that number 6, as your son Tim did,
that's right,
that is the home run? That's
a really good point, and that kind of sums it up. Because when I look back at a long life, a wonderful life, I only regret the times I said no. I mean, it's really true. I don't even think about the guys, good entrepreneurs, and venture capitalists, you know, try to take all the credit for all these good deals. But the truth is, the entrepreneurs are the ones that they are supporting, and a good venture capitalist is in a support system to build a great company. They're not in for the quick buck and shouldn't be. And if they work hard to build that great company, and they've got good entrepreneurial team in there, it will happen. But those entrepreneurs that try and don't succeed, I don't even think about the failure. I don't look back with great regret at being a part of that effort, even though it didn't work. So the key thing here is for all our young people to get a dream, follow it hard, work hard, because luck is very important, but somehow you get luckier the harder you work, as all of you know here. So I think you end up with a very interesting, and wonderful creative atmosphere that we've all got. But I don't look back at the failures or the missteps I can't say that totally. I made a variety of mistakes that I remember, but mostly it's the yes that has been the happiness, the yes that's made the money, it's the yes that made you comfortable with yourself, it's the yes that got you a great spouse. It's yeah, let's be optimistic. If I were a little older, I might have a pessimistic point of view, but I'm such a young man that I'm still an optimist.
Speaking of being youthful, let me ask you one last thing about a story you tell that has to do with wanting to say yes, I think, and also having a sense of humor. You came back to your office one day, and two of your colleagues were laughing uproariously about a pitch that they had just heard that they thought was hysterical, and you said, "Well, what are you laughing about? What's being pitched?" And
that's right.
One of them turned to you sort of sheepishly and said, "A vibrator." And you responded by saying,
"Well, so this was the story. They were saying, well, gosh," they were laughing and they said that but they were enjoying the time talking about it. They said, I said, what's going on? "Oh, this guy just came, we've just had a pitch made about a new, very exotic vibrator with lots of exotic parts." And I said, "Gosh, that's interesting. Our daughter Polly sent Phyllis a vibrator, and it's blue, and it's just great. I was thinking of putting it in the living room for have the friends use it because it's just terrific." And they're going like this. They are just totally. Well, Polly had sent this big blue chair with a back vibrator and all this, and that's what I thought they were talking about.
So it's always good to say yes. That's the story. All right, and to your questions. Is Facebook a good risk? Someone wants to know.
Oh, boy. I think, Tim made a bid for them at $70 million and was outbid by Excel at $120 million value. And, I didn't ever see it. But how you value these things that are sort of out there and social networking and going to change the world, it just depends on your attitude and your ability to put yourself out in front and see the future. And Tim knew it was good because his young daughter, 21 at the time, I think, used it a lot. And so, but he got outbid. I think that Facebook today at $50 billion is a little steep, but I'm pretty old, and I have, I used to remember we measured things on the basis of a guy would come in and he's running a company and it's doing a couple of million in sales, and we would say to ourselves, okay, 2 million in sales, and it's not profitable, but when it gets to be profitable, it would probably earn 5% after taxes, and then you paid 50% taxes, I think, before reg. So it would be 20 times earnings would make sense. And we're expecting it to go up, and so we'll make money as it goes up. So we would say pay 1 time sales. Well, if an entrepreneur came in to see me today and I offered 1 time sales, he'd laugh, he'd say, you're not reading the newspapers and so on. So it's very hard to say that $50 billion, but this is a game changer. This Facebook, we're going to do our internet on it. We're going to socialize on it. We already are doing all these things, and we are, our communication system is radically changed by Facebook. So to say it's not worth $50 billion is just probably head in the sand.
Here's someone who wants to know about philanthropy. With all the great wealth created in Silicon Valley, can you address how philanthropy fits into the community of social entrepreneurship? Before you respond, Bill, if I might, Bill has, and his partner, Robin Richards, have created a foundation, the Draper Richards Foundation, which, among other things, funds people in the role of social entrepreneurs. And I just want to tell one quick story, if I might. What they do is they provide $100,000 fellowships to people who are getting started in the field of social entrepreneurship to create some idea that will do good in the community. And this is just a brief example that I think is a telling one about a young man by the name of Jordan Cassillo, who was an optometry student. And in his first year of optometry school, he went down to Mexico to work with poor children. And he came across a boy who everyone thought was blind. Only when they measured his prescription, they found that he was just extraordinarily nearsighted. So they went to the box of eyeglasses they had to find the strongest one. And here's what he says happened next. Sure enough, there was a pair that was 90% of his prescription. So I brought them back, and I was the lucky guy who got to put them on this 7-year-old boy's face. As the lenses aligned with his eyes, his whole facial expression changed, from that of a stare of a blind person to the face of a beautiful, animated 7-year-old boy, and he just smiled from ear to ear because I was the first person he ever saw in his life. It's a wonderful story. But what's better, I think, about it is what that man, Jordan Cassillo, has gone on to do by creating a company called Vision Springs that now builds businesses. His idea, right, and take it from here, Bill, is to allow people in developing countries to do a business out of a box, to carry around a backpack full of eyeglasses, sell them at low cost, have a business, but bring children vision.
Yeah. No, this is the most exciting thing that Robin Richards, the woman that started with me to go into India. We were the first investors, the first venture capital firm from the U.S. to go to India. Now there are probably 25 or 30 of them. And Robin is just a fantastic partner. And she and I decided that we would give some of the profits back, because we made 16 times our money on in 6 years on the India program. And so we decided that we would start up a foundation that would give $100,000 a year for 3 years and a lot of coaching, as you do in the seed funding for venture capital. So this was just like our venture capital business, except it was for social entrepreneurs. And Jordan was one of those. As Dave says, he was an optometrist, and he's now selling 1 million glasses in India, Latin America, and And his system is very simple. He buys the glasses. They could never do this, without bulk buying. Anyway, buys $1 glasses from, and they're just like the kind you get in a drugstore, and different, but mostly they're magnifying glass. So he buys them for $1, sells them to this typically female entrepreneur in India who gets an array of them, makes her a loan so that she never has to put any money into it, and then she sells them for $3. And the system has worked, and it's almost like a for-profit operation, but it couldn't really ever get started as a for-profit operation because he wanted to do it in the developing world, and it's just too difficult to get anybody around here to do it. So that thing has really worked. Vision Spring is the name of it.
And Bill, if I could interject, is that, do you look for in the Jordan Casselows of the world the same thing you look for in other entrepreneurs? Is it looking for passion,
Exactly.
looking for decisiveness, looking
Exactly.
for, yeah.
And they've even got a little more, and that's heart. They really wanted, not only everybody wants to change the world, but they want to do something for somebody else that is in a less fortunate position themselves. And we've got some wonderful people. John Wood was hiking in Nepal, and he realized that these up in the top of one of the peaks that he was hiking on, there was no school. And he said, well, where do these village kids go to school? Oh, they can't go to school because they'd have to walk down the mountain and up another mountain and wouldn't get back for supper. So he said, I'm going to devote my life to getting schools built in remote villages in developing countries. And he wrote a book called Leaving Microsoft to Change the World. He was then with Microsoft. And we gave him his first $100,000. And I went to visit him in Presidio, and they had a little office there. And he had a sleeping bag in the corner, and I said, well, what's that about? And he said, well, sometimes we spend the night in the office if we're working hard. I said, boy, this is good guy. We're going to back him. And but Jenny Schilling-Stein, who runs the foundation for me, very bright young woman, an MBA from Stanford, she said, wait, don't tell him. Because I want him to make sure we've gone over this carefully and so on. So I get back to the office, and years later, he tells the story in the book that he wrote that she had called and said, Bill wants to come over and go over your business plan with you. And he said, oh, great. Hung up and said, business plan? And John is now on a $30 million a year budget after that $100,000 was his first big money.
So this actually provides the answer to the next question, which is, what advice do you have for someone who may be considering a career in this field? It's clearly to have a sleeping bag in the corner of your office.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
That's what you need to do.
The Room to Read has now built 1,000 schools in about 6 or 8 countries in Asia and about 3 or 4 countries in Africa. It's a great operation.
And by the way, for the question about advice for being either a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur, there's several chapters in the book that go through all of that. Here's an interesting question, Bill. One of the accepted tenets in the Valley is to fail fast and often to accelerate innovation. What failure in your career did you learn the most from?
Let's see. That's a tough question. I don't know. I've had so many failures, I'm just racing through them. I think, there's one interesting story. I'm meant to be a money man and numbers fluent and so on. And my first big shock was when I took accounting at Yale as a sophomore or something. And it's the only course I've ever flunked, was accounting. And so I think I've learned a lot about not getting too worried about the numbers as they're projected by the entrepreneur, because they always overestimate the market. They always underestimate their difficulty in reaching that market. And so I don't worry too much about the detail. I really want to know much more about that personality. And I think I learned, the more I think about it, I never have answered that question before, and been asked it actually, and I'm delighted with my answer.
Why do so many startups today avoid venture capital?
Oh, I don't think they avoid it, but there are many more sources for them around here, because there are so many wealthy entrepreneurs or former entrepreneurs who want to have a hand in some other action. And so these angels are a very popular way of getting the early money. But I don't think, so in the startup phase, they often will go to angels before they approach a venture firm, because they want to get a little farther along. The angels are often a little less disciplined about their what they want to see, and they want to make a little more progress, so they don't have to give quite as much equity away and all that. But I don't think entrepreneurs really avoid venture capitalists. And by the way, there are some venture capitalists that you should avoid, and I think the entrepreneur should always do a thorough investigation about the reputation of that venture capitalist and find out if they've been supportive of other entrepreneurs, just like the entrepreneur should do a thorough investigation of the background of the entrepreneur.
To sum up, have a sleeping bag in the office, be willing to say yes, fail accounting, and know what a vibrator is.
Risk and reward. It's the delicate balance known to every innovator and investor in the startup game. Explore the history of computing, and you'll connect the past to the future. See you next time on the Computer History Museum presents Revolutionaries.